Getting into the individual substances, obviously the PIP31 is the substance of concern here. So we found that in flexible plastics, PVC cable insulation like polyurethane and polyethylene foam material like in EMI gaskets, as well as some other electronic components where you wouldn't expect to find those. We actually, on our blog post, and I've put a link to that as well, that we've put a little bit of analysis or a graphic up that shows some of the components that we've found the substance in, because we have a database, of millions and millions of parts in full. We're able to scan that and see, hey, who's reported this and where. And so you might want to take a look at that. I've linked to that as well. Now, the substance has not been tracked by supply chains prior to this regulation. And so, as I've mentioned before, its presence, as far as where it is and how much, largely unknown by the supply chain. And so this is what we have to go back and resolve, is fill those gaps. Since there's no allowable content threshold, it can't be present at any amount. So, anything that says it's below 1,000 parts per million, we have to throw that away and reevaluate. Again, this stuff is not going to be enforced through October 2024 and might be recast with new requirements before that date as well. So this is largely something that we have to work on the backfill, but it doesn't represent a critical risk at this point because of the delay in enforcement. Now, DecaBDE, used as a flame retardant, but largely eliminated in that capacity from the electronic supply chains. It's been restricted under EU rules as a PBDE for a long time. And it's also been faced by some other restrictions in the past as well at the member state level. So DecaBDE is a low risk for being present, but because the threshold is 0, it might be present in some trace amounts, and so we do need to check, right? There's no delay in enforcement on this one, meaning that the restriction is in force today. So we do want to make sure that we're complying with this requirement. HCBD, used to make rubber compounds as a solvent, hydraulic fluids, not likely to be found in electronic products. It is enforced as far as the restriction goes. There's no delay in enforcement, and there is no threshold provided. But again, risk here is very low for us as electronics producers. And the same goes with PCTP and TTBP. Risk is very low. The PCTP is allowed up to 1% by weight, so this is not likely to ever exceed that in electronic products. The TTBP only applies to lubricants. And so, and it's not actually going to come into effect until 2026. And the threshold is 0.3% by weight. So the chances of any electronic product exceeding this is very, very low. So moving on, then we have to realize that going back to these substances, if we do find them present in our products, we need to check and see if there's any exemptions that are applicable, because a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, these are banned, but they have allowed some exemptions. For example, for PIP31, we can use it in adhesives and sealants until January of 2025. Which is just slightly after the enforcement date starts. But we also can see that it's allowed in hydraulic fluids used in aviation and military applications. It's allowed in lubricants and greases. That's an important exemption because I've seen PIP31 turn up in lubricants used in hard drives. Well, guess what? That's an allowed exemption. So even though it's in your hard drive, you're okay. So it's important to understand these exemptions exist to make sure that you're able to check on those. Also, new and replacement parts for motor and aerospace vehicles, engine air filters for locomotive applications. But more importantly, any recycled plastics you're using, if you take a plastic and reuse it, it's allowed to have the PIP31 as long as you're not adding the 3.1 in. So any pre-existing recycled plastic that contains PIP31 is allowed. Right. DecaBDE has similar kinds of exemptions that are allowed. We don't really care about the curtains in the hospitality industry. Maybe we don't even care about the cable and nuclear power facilities, but parts for new aerospace vehicles until 2024 and replacement parts for motor vehicles until 2036. Those are significant exemptions that might be applicable. So keep in mind that if you're making those kind of parts, you might have some leeway with DecaBDE. And the same exemption applies for using recycled plastics that contain DecaBDE. That's totally allowed. The other 3 substances, no really applicable exemptions that we need to discuss today.
Learn more by viewing the full-length video online at greensofttech.com/videos. Plus, learn about our environmental regulation solutions online at greensofttech.com.